Online dating can definitely make finding love easier, but it also comes with some risks. One big concern is that you never really know who you're meeting. We've all heard those creepy online dating stories, and sadly, some of them have even turned fatal. Today, we're going to talk about one such case where a woman tragically lost her life to a man she met through a dating app. This is the story of Enen Cahyati. One day in March 2018, a hotel worker at the Hometown Suite Hotel in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, noticed a horrible smell coming from a room booked under the name Belal Abdul Fatin. Concerned, the worker unlocked the door to find something truly disturbing: a woman's body decomposing and lifeless. The hotel staff immediately called the police. As they searched the room, they found an ID card revealing the woman's identity: Enen Cahyati, an Indonesian mother of 3. But the man who booked the room, Belal, was nowhere to be found. This set off a frantic search. Authorities knew they were dealing with a dangerous situation, a killer on the loose. But who was Belal, and how did Enen, just a mother trying to navigate life, end up involved with him? As the investigation unfolded, more of their story came to light. A dark story of a woman caught in an abusive relationship with a man, which tragically led to her death. So let's take a step back and look at how this all began, tracing the events that led to this tragic end. There's not much information available about Enen Cahyati's background. She was born in Jakarta in 1970, back when the city was still a bustling yet old-fashioned metropolis. Her family wasn't very well off, but they got by day to day. Enen later married a man named Hassanuddin, and they had 3 children together. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't last, though the reasons for their split are unknown. After the divorce, Enen took custody of the kids. Determined to find love again, Enen turned to a dating site for Muslims called Muslima.com. In 2014, she met a man named Belal Abdul Fatin. He was an American staying in Indonesia because he was having some trouble back home. Belal was known to be a stocky black man. His stature was slightly hunched, maybe because he was old. The two started chatting and eventually decided to meet in person. At that time, Enen didn't know about Belal's shady past, so she decided to give him a chance. Belal wasn't exactly the ideal man when it came to his dating history. According to sources, he lied to Enen about his age, claiming to be 46 when he was actually 66. He also bragged about having many wives through contract marriages. For those unfamiliar, a contract marriage is essentially a marriage with specific terms, like being married for a set period or under certain conditions after which the marriage ends. Belal boasted about having many such marriages, as well as marriages not recognized by law with various women. Despite these red flags, Enen went to meet Belal, who was staying at the Abyss Hotel in Sarina, Jakarta. But this wasn't your typical first date. As soon as Enen stepped into his hotel room, Belal locked the door and started grilling her about her life. Enen was caught off guard and tried to explain that she couldn't stay the night, but Belal insisted, leaving her with no choice but to stay. During their time together, Belal revealed that he was already ceremonially married to another woman named Vera. This made Enen uncomfortable, and before she could voice her concerns, Belal abruptly asked her to marry him. When Enen said that she didn't want to be in a polygamous marriage, Belal became enraged and kicked her out of his room in the middle of the night. But that wasn't the end of their story. Just a week later, Enen got a call from Belal. He had been arrested for assaulting his wife, Vera. Vera had reported him for sexual assault, but when Belal told the police they were married, the charge was downgraded to domestic abuse. He was sentenced to 7 years in jail and needed help with bail. With no one else to turn to, he reached out to Enen, who, feeling sorry for him, agreed to help. Maybe it was out of pity, or maybe she still had feelings for him, but Enen visited Belal often in jail. It's assumed that at some point they discussed marriage again. Enen even went to her family for their opinion and blessing, which surprisingly they gave, though some found it odd. Her ex-husband Hassanuddin, for example, thought Enen might be after Belal's money since he was a foreigner, but that was far from the truth. In 2015, while Belal was still in prison, they got married in a ceremonial marriage that wasn't legally binding. From then on, Enen dedicated her time and money to gathering bail for her new husband. She even borrowed money from her family and children to add to what she had saved. Clearly, Belal wasn't the wealthy foreigner her ex-husband assumed he was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to rely on Enen for bail. Fortunately for Belal, after 3 years in prison, the bail money was finally enough to get him out. After his release, Enen brought him to live with her, her mother, and her 3 children in Jakarta. What she hoped would be a peaceful and loving marriage quickly turned into something far from it. Given Belal's violent history, it wasn't exactly surprising. One of Enen's kids, Nailul Muna, noticed that their mom's behavior changed drastically. She became distant, barely speaking to her kids, even when they were all together. It was as if the life was being drained out of her. Belal was odd too. The violent behavior that had gotten Belal in trouble before started showing up again. One of her children, Lulu, later described that she would often find her mother with signs of abuse, even strangulation. She even slept in front of her mom's bedroom door to protect her. Still, the abuse continued whenever Lulu and her siblings weren't around. Once, Lulu saw her mother with a bruised jaw and blood on her prayer clothes. The kids remembered one particular trip when Enen and Belal went out of town. Everyone thought it would be a nice honeymoon trip, but they soon got a call from a relative saying that their mom had returned home sick. When they saw her, Enen's body looked frail and almost yellowish. The kids couldn't help but suspect that Belal had something to do with it, but they had no idea what had actually happened. Later, Enen revealed to her children and family what Belal had forced her to do during the trip. Short on money, Belal pressured Enen to become a beggar and ask for donations from an institution. When she refused, Belal got angry and forced her to borrow money from an acquaintance. When that didn't work out, he beat her, leaving her weak and sickly. Another incident that showed Belal's disturbing behavior happened during a trip to Bali. The two stayed at a hotel to enjoy the island, but things quickly went downhill. For some reason, Belal became convinced that Enen was having an affair with a man staying in the room next door every time Belal went out. This baseless accusation often led to fights and even threats of murder, making Enen's experience on the trip miserable. Belal even went so far as to lock Enen in the hotel room whenever he left alone. Eventually, Enen reached her breaking point and started looking for any chance to escape. When Belal wasn't paying much attention, she made a run for it, fleeing from the hotel. She ran aimlessly until she found a bus station where she stayed for the night, crying and regretting everything that had happened, all while trying to figure out how she would get back home. Fortunately, a kind stranger noticed Enen crying and asked her what was wrong. Feeling sorry for her, the stranger offered to help by contacting her family to see if anyone could assist. After getting in touch with her family and explaining the situation, Enen's ex-husband, Hassanuddin, sent her money for a ticket home. When Enen arrived back home in Jakarta, her family hoped that this would finally be the end of her relationship with Belal. They comforted her and offered support after hearing the full story of what had happened in Bali. Everyone was left wondering what was wrong with Belal. He acted so meek in front of others, but turned violent when alone with Enen. They even speculated that he might have some kind of split personality disorder. But unfortunately, it turns out that wasn't the end of their relationship. Just 2 weeks later, Belal showed up at Enen's house. Everyone braced themselves for a confrontation, expecting him to be furious after Enen running away. But instead of causing a scene, Belal brought 50 million rupiahs and asked Enen if she wanted to go to Cambodia with him. Nobody knew where the money came from, and no one dared to ask. Belal tried to sweeten the deal by promising they would travel around Asia with stops in Singapore and Malaysia. Enen was understandably hesitant, still shaken by her previous experiences with Belal. She knew that if something went wrong again, it would be too expensive for her family to get her back home from another country. Her family also tried to convince her not to go, but Belal kept pressing, and eventually, Enen agreed. It's unclear what he said to persuade her, but Enen told her family that they were just going to Cambodia to get some of Belal's money. The day of departure came on March 19th, 2018. Enen, Belal, and her children all drove to the airport. Her kids noticed that their mom seemed tired and still hesitant to leave the country with Belal. Before boarding, she turned to her children and softly said she'd be back on Thursday. They hugged her goodbye, not realizing it would be the last time they would see or hear from her. As the day of Enen's return approached, her children started to worry. They hadn't heard from her at all, and their calls went unanswered. Thursday came and went with no sign or words from their mother. While they tried to stay positive, thinking maybe she was continuing her travels and just couldn't contact them, the growing silence made them increasingly anxious. It wasn't until Sunday, March 25th, 2018, that Enen's family finally received a call, not from her, but from the Indonesian Foreign Ministry. The news they got was absolutely shocking. Their mother, Enen Cahyati, had been found dead at a hotel in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. At first, they couldn't believe it, but after checking Cambodia's news outlets, they realized it was true. The entire family was devastated. Autopsy results showed that Enen's death was caused by strangulation. Enen and her husband, Belal Abdul Fatin, had checked into the hotel on March 19th. Police reports indicate that she had been dead for about 3 days before her body was discovered. Belal, who was the prime suspect, fled the scene and has been on the run ever since. He is believed to have left Cambodia shortly after the murder. The Indonesian government has said they would involve Interpol to help track him down. The Director of Protection for Indonesian Citizens and Indonesian legal entities at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has also mentioned working with the US to help locate Belal and ensure justice is served. Despite efforts by Indonesian authorities, including coordination with Interpol, Belal's whereabouts are still unknown, and he has not been brought to justice. All we can do now is wait and keep this case in the public eye. Because of the high cost of bringing Enen's body back to Indonesia, which is around 100 million rupiahs, her family made the heartbreaking decision to have her buried at the Cambodian Muslim cemetery complex in a village in Kandal province. Their grief over losing their mother and daughter was compounded by their frustration that Belal still hasn't been caught and brought to justice. The death of Enen Cahyati is a tragic mystery, so close to being solved yet still out of reach. What led to her attack? And most importantly, where is Belal Abdul Fatin now? Enen's family, who continue to pray for justice, need these answers more than anyone. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.